This is the introduction to our new chapter on probability. We'll start with these images up on the screen. There are some key words that you need to know. So the first one that's here, we're going to see this word a lot in the chapter, outcomes. You'll hear me use the word outcome, but all that means is all the possible things that could happen. For example, if I said to you, what are the outcomes of a footy match? Well, Essendon could win or Collingwood could win. They're the two outcomes. If I were to flip a coin, what are the outcomes? All the possible things could happen. It could land on heads or it could land on tails. They are the outcomes. So that word is just a fancy word to mean all the things that could happen when we're dealing with an event. You'll then see these words, event space or sample space. These are just talking about a list of all the possible things that could happen. So when I said to you, write down the event space or write down the sample space of all the things that could happen, you're writing down a list of events. If I were talking about going to McDonald's and randomly picking something off the menu, if I said, what's the sample space? The sample space would be a list of every single item on the menu. If I said to you, no, I won't give away the next example. If I said to you, pick a coloured texter out of my hand, and I show you 3 coloured texters, the sample space would be a list of all the different coloured texters that I was holding. So now, I would like you to try and fill in these next 2 examples. I'd like you to write down the sample space for flipping a coin and for rolling a die. Next to those phrases, write down a list of all the different things that could happen. That's the sample space. Pause that and do it now. Then, here are your answers. Flipping a coin, the sample space is heads or tails. That's a list of what could happen. Rolling a die, a list of what could happen. The sample space is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's how I want you to write it, just with a comma in between each one. Now, here we get to probability. Have a look at this slide here. Probability is talking about the chances of something happening. So this chapter is all about the chances of an event happening. Often we'll talk about, what's the chance that it'll rain tomorrow? We're talking about probability. If I said, what are the chances of passing my next test? You're talking about probability. So this formula, while it may not make sense to you now, I want you to just trust me and write it down. I know you're looking at that thinking, I don't really understand what it means. That's okay, you're not supposed to understand it yet. Write that down, please. It's like a little formula or a little way that I want you to set out your working out for all these questions. It is much easier than it sounds, but once you've got it written down, I'll explain to you what it means. Anything that you see there written in italics, we just swap those words for usually a number. Could be a word sometimes, but usually it's a number. Now, what we're going to be working out today are what is the probability of a certain event occurring. So if I said to you, what's the probability that it will rain tomorrow? You look at the weather and say, there's a 60% chance of rain. Or you could tell me as a fraction. You could say there's a 1 out of 3 chance of it raining. We probably wouldn't use a fraction for that example. But whenever we're dealing with probabilities, we can talk in fractions, percentages, or decimals. 90% of the time, the ones that we'll see are written in fraction form. But it's okay because you don't need to do much maths with the fractions, and if you do, your calculator does it for you. Now, I want you to use that formula you've just written down with this example. Here we are. I want to know what is the probability of rolling a die and landing on a 4. What's the probability of rolling a die and getting a 4? So here's how you write out your answer. You start by writing PR with that little bracket opening. PR, of course, stands for probability. Then inside that bracket, you need to write down what you want to happen. So look at that little sentence there. What do you want to happen? you want to get a 4. So that's what you write inside the little bracket next to it. I want you to be doing this as I'm saying it. You need to have it written down before it comes up on the screen. So you've got PR, then you've got a bracket. What do you want to happen? I want to get a 4. So you put a little 4 inside the brackets and then you close it. Then put your equals sign. Now you've got to do a fraction. I want you to try and work these numbers out on your own. It's going to be a number on the top and a different number on the bottom. The number on the top says the number of outcomes that you want to happen. So think about it. When you roll that die, you want to get a 4. How many sides of a regular die show the number 4? That's what number goes on the top. Oh, I do just want to point out, dice, D-I-C-E, dice, that's plural. That means 2 or more. 1 die, singular die. That's why I keep saying that. So think about it. On a regular die, how many sides are a number 4? That's what number goes on the top of your fraction. On the bottom of your fraction, the total number of possible outcomes. So think about it. When I roll a die, what's the total number of different things that could happen? How many different numbers could come up? That's what number goes on the bottom. If you want to pause it to write down your answer, do that now. Otherwise, here comes the next slide. That's what your final answer should look like. Probability of rolling a 4 is 1 out of 6. Because on a regular die, there's only one number 4 out of a total 6 sides. That's where your answer comes from. Okay, we'll move over to the whiteboard now and we'll do some more questions involving rolling a die. Here are a whole lot of different outcomes, a whole lot of different things that could happen. I'm still saying I'm rolling a die. This is my scenario. Then I've written 4 different things. Your job is to write down this, and then next to it you need to write down a fraction. Using the little formula that you just wrote down, you need to put a fraction here. This is me saying, if I'm rolling a die, what's the probability that it lands on a 3? And you've got to write a fraction down there. I'll pause it in a sec for you to do all of them. This one says, if I roll a die, what's the probability that I land on an odd number? The next one, this symbol, if you've forgotten what it means, quickly write it down now. That means probability of it landing on a number less than 5. If you think you'll forget, make a little note, that means less than 5. Last one says, if I roll a die, what's the probability that it lands on not the number 2? Pause it, write a fraction next to each one. Here are your answers for each one. The probability of getting a 3, there's one number 3 out of a possible 6 numbers on the die. Odd, there are 3 odd numbers, 1, 3 and 5. So there are 3 things that I want to happen. 3 odd numbers, that's why 3 goes on top, out of a possible 6 sides. Now there is something you have to do with this fraction. While it is half correct, we need to simplify the fraction. You always need to simplify your fraction. So if you stopped here, you'd get like half a mark instead of a full mark. You need to simplify the fraction, but your calculator can do it for you. If you just type in 3/6 and press enter, it'll give you the answer. That's all you need to do. So if you don't know how to do it by hand, you just type in the fraction, and if it can be simplified, it simplifies it for you. So this actually turns into a half, and that's what you need to write to get your full answer. Next one, I've said getting a number less than 5. A common question here is, does it include 5? Well, is 5 less than 5? No, it's not. So it doesn't include the number 5. That means I wanted to get the numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4. 4 numbers out of the total 6. Again, this fraction can be simplified as well. So you need to, if you're not sure, put that in your calculator and it tells you that it turns into 2/3. Last one, not the number 2. So I could get a 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 5 options out of the possible 6. That's where my fraction comes from. Okay, I'll fill in the next side of the board with some other examples. Our next example is talking about picking out a card from a regular deck of playing cards. Now, these questions come up all the time. A lot of students find them difficult because they don't know what a deck of cards looks like. So have a look at this image on the screen now. I want you to all download and save, or at the very least have a web browser open with a picture of a deck of cards. Have that open at all times while answering these questions so you know what a deck of cards looks like. A couple of things we should point out. Have a look at this picture very closely. You need to know how many cards there are, because if I'm asking you to pick one out, you have to know how many there are altogether. There are 52 cards there. Very important to know. Also have a look, there's two different colours there. It could be red or they could be black. There are also 4 different suits. Can you see what I mean by suits? That's what each row is. So there's the 2 black suits are called spades and clubs. The 2 red suits are called hearts and diamonds. Look at the faces of the cards. There's no number 1, it's an ace instead of a 1. After it gets to 10, they are called jack, queen and king. So keep that open to help you answer these questions. I'm asking you, if you pull out one random card, what's the chances that it's the 3 of spades? So you go back and look at your picture, your deck of cards, have a look how many of them are a 3 of spades. That's the fraction that would go there. I'll give you a clue. There are 52 cards, so that will be your bottom number of most of your fractions, but you'll have to simplify some of them. Type them in your calculator and they will simplify them for you. Pause it and answer these questions. Here are your answers. I've also simplified the fractions already. Let's have a quick look through. There is only 1 3 of spades in the whole deck. So if I asked you to pull out that one card, you've only got a 1 in 52 chance, because only one card out of the whole 52 is a 3 of spades. There are more 3s, but there's a 3 of diamonds, a 3 of clubs, only 1 3 of spades. Next one, picking out a red card. Well, you could have counted them and said, yep, there are 26 red cards out of 52. Or you could look and say, well, half the deck is red and half the deck is black. That's where that number comes from. Getting a 6 or a jack. Well, when you look and you count all your cards, there are 4 6s and there are 4 jacks. That means there are 8 cards that I would want to choose out of 52. Type that in your calculator, it simplifies it to 2 over 13. Diamonds. One of the rows is diamonds. So 13 of those cards are diamonds out of 52. Or there were 4 rows and 1 row was diamonds, 1 out of 4. Last one, the probability that you do not pull out an 8. 48 out of 52. Because only 4 cards, there are only 4 8s in the whole deck. Everything else you want. So you get that number and it simplifies to that.